Hello everybody and welcome to my video on the Kodak Pony 135 camera. In case you were wondering what this is, it's the camera. And this is kind of worn out here, but this is, I believe that's the Model C. Yeah, it looks like it. If I'm wrong, I'll correct myself later in this video because I probably put it in the outline. Anyway, the Kodak Pony 135 is a 35mm fixed lens viewfinder camera. What that means is that the lens right here cannot come off. It has a viewfinder here that you look through the back and you can kind of sight up what's in front of the camera and what will be in the photo. And it can use any 35mm film, and we'll see how to use that later in this video. It has no built-in light meter, so if you do want to do light meter readings, you either need a light meter app on your smartphone or a handheld light meter. The shutter is a leaf shutter. It has shutter speeds of bulb, 1/125th, 50th, 1/100th, and 1/300th on this model. There is some variation over the model life of the different models, A, B, and C. I think that I forget if there's a D, I don't think so. There is some variation in the shutter speeds on the different models of Pony 135. Generally, the Pony 135 is not taken seriously as a camera because of the limited interface options. While there is some credibility to that, meaning that it's not going to be a camera that you can use to take like professional work, especially now in the age of digital, it is still a very fun to use camera, and they can still return quality images. This camera came in 3 models, the A, B, and C, with this one being a C. I remembered correctly. There is no Model D. I remembered kind of correctly. The French version of this camera also is a bit less uncommon than the American version of these cameras. And you know you have a French camera if instead of the Kodak Aniston lens, you have an ingenue lens in either f3.5 or f4.5, and the shutter timings are different. I don't know the shutter timings of the French cameras, but they are different than the ones that are on this American camera. The target market for the Kodak Pony 135 was the entry-level user, basically like a Boy Scout who's going after their photography merit badge and this is their first camera, or somebody who just does quick snapshots, something like this. We know it's an entry-level camera because it has very basic settings. For the time, this was an incredibly basic camera. Also, instead of having film speeds on the top here, it has Kodak film types. So this isn't a meter interface, this is just a reminder of what type of film you're using up here, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a couple of moments. The lenses are relatively slow, even by the standards of the day when this was made. f3.5 to f4.5 were considered slow lenses, especially 4.5 for 35mm cameras. And also the body here, this brown part of it anyway, is made out of Bakelite instead of metal. So I will say, it is a good-looking camera. I do think that the Pony 135 is a very attractive 35mm camera. The Bakelite on these has really just aged very well, and I think that the brown color with the champagne metal on top just is really well done, and the overall look of it is very nice. That's also something you find more in entry-level cameras, is a design aesthetic that's meant to appeal to lots of people. These were made by Kodak. In the US, there were 3 models, the A, B, and C, and in France, there was the French version, which looked just much different than this one, apparently. I recall seeing a picture or two of the French one, and it did look different than this one. The Model A of this camera was produced from 1950 to 1954, the Model B from 1953 to 1955, and the Model C, this one, from 1955 until 1958. And the French version was produced for only 1 year in 1956. This was preceded by nothing directly, as the Pony cameras were their own lineup, the 135s and the 828s, and this, I guess, would have been preceded by the Model B, but the Pony lineup didn't have anything that came before it that this would have been a direct descendant from. It was concurrent also, by the way, with so many Kodak cameras. They were just churning out tons of different cameras in the 50s. And it was followed by nothing, as the Pony 135 models were the only Pony models that were released that used 35mm film. So now as we do, let's go over the different features of the camera, and we'll start here on the top. Technically on the sides, there are these little silver things here, and those holes in the top of the silver things are your camera strap lugs. And then here we have the film rewind dial. This is your film type reminder, and so like I said, instead of using ISOs, they use your different types of film, none of which are still in production, by the way. We have, let's see, Daylight Kodachrome plus X, Daylight Ektachrome, also, by the way, Type F Ektachrome and Type F Kodachrome. Those would have been, I believe, the tungsten balanced. Tri-X over here. Oh, Tri-X is still in production. I take that back. You can still get Tri-X in 35mm. And then Panatomic X. So of these, you could still get Ektachrome, I guess. That's true. Ektachrome is now a daylight balanced film. But the Ektachrome of the time that this was made has not been produced for a very long time. Kodak logo, shutter release button, frame count dial, which also is a manual reset frame count dial, film winding dial over here. On the camera's front, we have the viewfinder window, Kodak, model maker, model number, the indication that it's a camera, that is a Model C Pony. Here we have the lens itself. On the lens, what's the best way to hold this? I think that'll be okay. Here we have your focus ring on the very front of the lens, and it focuses from infinity to as close as 2.5, a little bit closer than 2.5 feet, which empirically is very good for a rangefinder camera in this class. Here is the shutter speed selection dial. You might be able to see there's a little triangle right there on top of the shutter that as you adjust the shutter speed selection dial, that is adjusted. The 50 is in red, by the way, and we'll get to that in just a few moments. This is the aperture selection lever right here that I'm moving with my index finger. So as you adjust the aperture, then the aperture stops down inside of the lens, and that's used for depth of field and illumination control. And then on the back in red is a guide for your aperture settings. Now you might see that the 50 is in red and this guide is in red. That's not a coincidence. The guide here is calibrated to 50 ISO because most of these films here would have exposed properly at 50 ISO. Now, if you are shooting the Ektachrome, it says here in black, then what you want to do is instead of going with the red numbers at 50th of a second, you want to go with the black indications. So let's say you were shooting Kodachrome or Panatomic X and you had it set at a 50th of a second, and it was a cloudy day, you'd want to use f3.5. Or if it was a bright day, you'd want to use f5.6, apparently. That would be for Kodachrome. It does specify in red that that's Kodachrome. Then for the Ektachrome, if it was a cloudy day, you'd want to use a stop slower. So let me just reverse a little bit and say that the red numbers there you will never use because Kodachrome is not coming back. It would have applied to a 25 ISO Kodachrome film. And then the black numbers here would apply to probably a 50 or 100 ISO Ektachrome film, or not the numbers, but the indicators behind the aperture lever would apply to a 100 ISO Ektachrome. Now today you would just use a smartphone light meter and dial in the settings it gives you, or you could use the Sunny 16 rule, which is in full sun at f16 like this. You would use the shutter speed, which is closest to your film's ISO sensitivity number. Here we have the shutter arming lever, which is what you would use to arm the shutter. Before you take a picture, you have to arm the shutter. And we'll go through that later in the video when we talk about how to take a photo. This is the flash port. This is an old style of flash port right here, where the cable clipped onto it and twisted into place. I don't remember what this is called, maybe the American standard, but it predates the modern type of flash port. That modern flash port looks like the circle here on this Umeka, right? So that's what a modern flash cable will plug into. A modern flash cable will not plug into this. I honestly cannot tell you if conversion cables exist or not. My best guess is that this shutter is timed to trigger flash bulbs, not X flashes anyway. So we're not even going to talk about flash use in this video because I don't think there is a way to, without a hefty modification to the shutter, to connect the modern flash to it. The camera back does not have a whole lot. We have the viewfinder window. We have the wind lever right here, which we'll talk about how to use in a bit. And then we have the rewind lever here, which you would use to help rewind your film. On the camera's bottom, we don't have a whole lot. Again, we have the tripod socket and we have the serial number. And then there's a little foot right here that it feels just like a little cone. And what that allows you to do is, like, let's say you're at a picnic and you want to take a family photo, you just set this on the edge of the picnic table and it rests flat so that it will take a picture of your group shot. On the inside of the camera, here's the side that we open. We push down this little button right here on the edge of the side. Oh, that was much easier than I expected. And then just push down and the back pops off. So if you are doing this outside, be sure you're holding that back, because if you break one of these, it's going to be harder to replace the back than just to buy a new camera. This is the film cassette chamber. Here's a little spring that helps keep the film cassette properly aligned so that the film moves through the camera properly. These are your film guide rails here on the outside. These two rails here that keep the film from moving up and down as it travels. This is your film tension sprocket, which keeps the film moving through the camera evenly, but also, when it's not been disengaged, prevents the film from moving backwards. Let's see if we can engage that. Maybe later when we actually load film. This is the film take-up spool, which is where you will put the film so that it advances. On the back of the camera, we have the film pressure plate right here and a reminder of what the camera is and to use Kodak film. Any 35mm film will do. You don't have to use Kodak film in it. You could use Ilford or Foma, Kentmere, Shanghai, Fuji, whatever you wanted to use will be just fine. And as you can see down there, there's a little piece of cotton yarn jammed into that. I didn't do that, and I'm not sure if that came from the factory that way or if somebody else put that in because the camera was leaking light. Both of those are viable possibilities. While we have the back of the camera open, let's load it up with some film. So to load it, we're going to push this up, or pull it up, because it's spring-loaded, and we have to hold it in place while we drop the cassette in. There we go. Next, we're going to pull out the leader here, and we're going to advance the film take-up spool until we can see a little slit right here, which we will feed the leader into, just like that. Now we're going to wind. There we go. That's how it's supposed to work. So the way that this film tension sprocket is re-engaged is by this winding and it spinning at the same time. Now that that is loaded, we're going to take the back of the camera and we're going to put it back on, hold it in place, and lift the lock back into place. Now, one of the nice things about this lock is because these are the camera strap lugs, the weight of the camera pulls down on the lock, so it's not going to open while you're carrying it around. What happens when you take a picture is you have to arm the shutter on the front here, take the picture, and then nothing happens. You can't advance the film until you hit the wind button. And now you can advance the film. What you're going to do is you're going to do that twice because you want to get the film up to the first frame. And twice will do it with this camera. Now that you've done that, you want to find how many frames are on your roll of film. Is it 36 or is it 24? This is a manually reset frame counter that counts downward. So you can turn it in the direction of that arrow right there only. If you turn it the other way, you are going to mess up the mechanism. So let's say we have a 36 exposure roll. Too far. Let's pretend we have a 24 exposure roll. There we go. We would just line up that little black triangular index with the number 24. And then as we take photos, you can see that that counts down one frame each time we take a photo. So it's a bit of a complicated system, but there is only one way to do it right. And so as long as you are following the procedure, you're not going to waste any film. Also, the way this system works is double exposure prevention is built into it. Film is one and done. It can record an image exactly once by the proper amount of light hitting it because you've had a proper shutter speed and aperture, or which is a controlled exposure, or in a completely uncontrolled exposure by doing something like this and opening the back of the camera. So when you're using film, you don't want to open up the back of the camera and because doing this will erase all of the photos that you have taken or would take in the future on the film that is outside of the cassette. But I want to show you how this process works when you take a picture. The shutter window is right about here. Arm the shutter, take the photo, click the wind, and as we advance the film, you can see that it's pulled out of the cassette and moves through the camera. And you know, with the film back closed, that everything is working correctly. If you see the rewind knob here, if it moves in the opposite direction of the film, arrow, because what's happening is when you do that correctly, the film's being taken out of the spool. The rewind arrow is for bringing the film back into the spool. Okay, you still got your film back on the back of your camera, and you are done shooting. So now it's time to rewind the film. We're going to hit the rewind button. So you have to hold the rewind button this direction, and now you can dial the rewind dial to take the film back up into the cassette. There we go. Now at this point, you can open up the back of your camera. In real life, you will generally want to rewind this all the way into the cassette, but I need to use this later, so I'm not going to. Then you pull out the cassette that you just used, grab your new cassette, and if you are going to keep shooting for the day, you just reload the camera exactly as we just saw. Or if you are done shooting for the day, what you're going to do is put the back of your camera back onto it, just like this. There we go. Make sure that your shutter is triggered and you're set. You want to trigger the shutter before you're done shooting for the day because everything in here is mechanical, and if you leave tension on the springs, that can weaken them and throw off your shutter timing accuracy. The next thing we're going to do is we talked a little bit about the lens, but we're going to go into detail about the markings on the lens. So here you've got a pretty good view of what the lens looks like. Here you can see what I was talking about in greater detail with the Kodachrome numbers in red and the Ektachrome numbers in black, and those are guides for that film type, for what type of aperture to use with what type of conditions. So if you had Ektachrome 100 in this camera, let's say, and it was cloudy, you would set your shutter speed to 1/50th of a second, and then your aperture to line up with that cloudy line, and then you know you're going to get an exposure which is pretty close, if not spot on. Here are your aperture numbers, and here are your shutter speed numbers. Now if we look at the front of the camera, this is where things get a little bit more interesting. Here's your focus knob right here, okay? So let's say you see these numbers here in red. They go from 3, 5, 5, 6, 8, 11, and 16. If you remember the aperture numbers, they are 3, 5, 5, 6, 8, 11, and 16. That's not a coincidence. These numbers here will tell you what's in focus. So let's say that you're going to use f16. Well, this actually goes up to f22, but that's not marked on the scale. We're going to stop it at f16. f22 is not an aperture that's great for 35mm anyway. Let's say that you want to get the maximum amount of the scene into focus that you can. So you've set your aperture to f16. We're going to take this infinity focus right here, and we're going to line it up with the f16 over here. Now we know everything from this 16 to this 16 will be in suitable focus, which is slightly more than 4 feet. Right here you can see that. All the way to infinity will be in focus. Okay, but what if you're using f8 and you still want to have infinity be in focus? Simply line up infinity with f8, and now we know everything from just a little bit more than 8 feet and a few inches, out to infinity will be in focus. Okay, but what if you wanted to shoot at f5.6 and take a portrait of somebody and they were standing 5 feet away? Well, let's line this up at 5 feet. This is your primary focus indicator. So we know that they're 5 feet away. Everything from 4 feet out to as much as slightly more than 6 feet will be in focus. So you've got about a 2-foot window to play with. If you needed to shoot at f3.5, then you would know everything from just shy of 5 feet to just shy of 6 feet would be in focus. So these scales correspond with the aperture, and what they will do is they will tell you with your focus point what will be in focus with each given aperture. So now that we've gone over all of those markings and what all of them mean and how to do so much of the stuff with this camera, let's talk about how to take an actual picture with it. Okay, so you're standing behind the camera. What you're going to do is you're going to look through the camera and sight up your scene. And what I mean by that is you're going to compose it. You're going to look through the viewfinder and decide what you want your image to look like. Okay, so you've got that composed. Next, you're going to estimate the distance to what you want to have be in primary focus. And you're going to set your focus to that point. Okay, say it's 15 feet away. There we are. Let's say we're shooting at f11 and we want to capture infinity in focus. Well, we could do that, but we're wasting a whole bunch of other focus. So we'll set infinity over here to f11, and now everything from 15 to infinity, but also everything from 15 down to almost 6 feet will be in focus. So whenever you're focusing at infinity, just as a tip, whatever your aperture is, set infinity to that aperture number, and what's at infinity will be in focus, but also a bunch of things closer to you, which will help you set yourself up to take better photos. So we've dialed in our aperture, which is going to be, we're going to go with f5.6 for this photo, and we're going to have our subject be 8 feet away. So we know everything from about 11 feet to as close as 6 feet will be in focus. Okay, because we've set the focus, set the aperture. We also know that we're shooting a 100 ISO film, and it's kind of a cloudy day. So we're going to set the shutter speed to 1/100th of a second. f5.6 will be just perfect for those settings. We'll go with that being what your light meter tells you anyway. Now we've got the image composed. We're going to arm the shutter, take the photo, hit the wind button, and advance the film until the wind stops. That's how we take a photo. There are no double exposures with this camera because it has double exposure prevention built into it. So some tips for using this camera, some things that will help you set yourself up for success. The first thing I would suggest is to use forgiving films for this camera. Now that specifically means black and white. These can take color photos, but they were produced at a time when black and white was the standard. And yes, they do have slide film indicators on them because Kodak definitely wanted to sell slide film. But black and white film does work the best in these. It has very good exposure forgiveness, and also older lenses from the 30s through the 50s tended to be less well corrected for color than modern lenses, so they work better with black and white. Ilford and Kodak films especially will work very well with these cameras. Exposure timing and shutter timing on these cameras are generally okay, at least with mine. And I've had 5 or 6 of these over the years and used most of them, and the exposure timing on them has always been a-okay. There are also others, I've also read about the shutters on these developing shutter lag over time, so you do want to kind of get a sense before you use it how well the shutter is working by test firing it and looking through the lens as you test fire it at a light source, not the sun, but like a lamp, and then testing it at each shutter speed, how the shutter timing looks, if it relatively looks twice or half as fast as the next shutter speed. So at any rate, these can definitely shoot color. Let me get back to that real quickly. These can definitely shoot color, but you will generally have better results in terms of image focus on black and white film. I would also suggest don't try to subject isolate with these or go crazy with your out of focus area bokeh, as they're called, shots. These lenses could probably kind of do it, but it would be very hard to do it well with a viewfinder camera. Viewfinder cameras were designed for zone focusing, which is what we talked about with the exposure scale, or the aperture scales right here. And they were not designed to be shot wide open at your closest focus point so that you can get crazy Borka balls in the background. Okay, that's not how they're meant to be used. So also a slightly wide lens like this, the 44 millimeters that these have, are not going to be super well suited, even wide open, for crazy bokeh. I suppose if you had one of these that was parts grade and you harvested the lens off of it and mounted it on a mirrorless, it might be okay for that, but don't quote me on that. I've never tried it. Also, the last tip I have for you, shoot these for fun and don't expect stunningly amazing results. Expect fun results that you can enjoy and share with people, because that's how they were designed and that's how they're meant to be used. Some things not to do with your camera specifically is don't store it in a plastic bag or box, because that can encourage the growth of fungus on your optics or in the plastic, and mildew in the plastic is a terrible smell. Whenever you're done shooting for the day, always remember to fire your shutter. Even if it causes you to waste a frame of film, because you don't want to leave tension on the springs inside of these shutters. They're all mechanical, and when you arm the shutter, it puts tension on the springs. Well, if you leave them tense like that overnight or for days or weeks, it can fatigue the springs, especially old cameras like this, and cause the shutter to either brick or not work with proper timing. Don't leave it in your car, because lubricating oils will get thin in the heat and muck up the mechanism in here, or in the winter they can get really gummy and break down and also cause your shutter timing to be off. Both of those scenarios can result in your shutter not working. Don't let it get wet. It's not weather sealed, and there are metal components in here that will rust. And just the last thing to remember is that your Kodak Pony is a precision tool that should be handled with care and respect. As long as you take care of your camera will take care of you. Thank you for watching this video. Please give me a thumbs up. That lets me know that I'm on the right track producing content which is useful and helpful to you. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those in the comments section below. I'm pretty good about checking these every couple of days and answering questions. If you have any suggestions or ideas for future videos, and if I have the technical know-how and equipment, I'm more than happy to make those. One last thing. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. I gotta get up, Steinbeck. I have to turn off the camera.